Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming out for our 9/11 tribute here at Azusa Pacific University. We are happy to be of service for this event. We haven't done this previously in the past, but we're going to do it each year once we get the chance. And thank you very much for coming out. Each year, New York City and millions around the country commemorate 9/11 with mournful ceremonies, volunteer, and appeals to never forget, and drawing attention to the terror attacks continuing to take toll on our first responders. Relatives of the victims descend on Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan, and the events of that terrible day and the weeks, months, and years that followed are never forgotten. Nor are the memories of those killed by terrorists and hijacked planes. Additionally, we remember all those who have died from 9/11 related illnesses from their heroic work done at Ground Zero and those who still suffer today. The 20-year anniversary of the 9/11 attacks has brought us here together today to show solidarity and remember the lives lost that day. Let me acknowledge our local civic leaders and representatives in attendance today. From the office of Senator Anthony Portantino, District Representative Marco Lundgren. From the office of Assemblywoman Blanca Rubio, District Representative Julissa Zepeda. Assemblywoman Blanca Rubio, District Representative Danae Amaya. City of Glendora, Mayor Karen Davis. From the City of Glendora, we have Councilman David Frittendahl. From Azusa Unified School District, we have Superintendent Arturo Ortega. From LA County Fire, Community Services Liaison, Adriana Watson. From the Azusa Chamber of Commerce, we have the Stephen Castro. And from the Glendora Chamber of Commerce, we have Joe Cena. All right, and I have another one, Mayor from the City of Irwindale, H. Manuel Ortiz. From Supervisor Catherine Barger's office, Field Deputy Vicky Paul. There you go. And from the great city of Glendora again, we have Council Member Michael Alawas. All right, so thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Today's guest speakers are Police Captain Robert Landeros from the Azusa Police Department, Acting Assistant Fire Chief Carl Flores, Deacon Mario Guerra, the civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army, retired United States Army First Sergeant Anthony Ball, Associate Director of Military and Veteran Outreach from Azusa Pacific University. We will hear a few words from Dr. Keith Hall, APU Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer today, and I would like to acknowledge guests, administrators, faculty, staff, and students from the university in attendance. We have also been blessed by the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Brass Quartet, which includes the bugler Sheldon Johnson. Each of the speakers will give us a glimpse of what they experienced about the day on 9/11 and the importance of the day that we must continue to remember and never forget. Our very own Army ROTC will present the colors, to be followed by the performing of the National Anthem by the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department Quartet. Please rise for the presentation of the colors and remain standing for the performance of the National Anthem.
Left, to left. Mark time. Mark. Shoot. Ball. Left. Face. Order, arms. Right, face. Forward, march. Left, 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 right,
I would also like to acknowledge our fellow members in arms currently serving in the United States service. We have representation from the United States Marine Corps, the U.S. Navy, and the United States Air Force. Can you give us a wave, please? Thank you very much for your support. I would like to introduce to you Staff Sergeant Francisco Cardenas from the Marine Corps Recruiting Station, Azusa campus, who will read the names of the 13 service members killed on 26 August in Afghanistan. Please stand for the reading of the names.
We acknowledge the 13 service members who paid the ultimate sacrifice in Afghanistan on August 26, 2021. Marine Corps Lance Corporal Jared M. Smits of St. Charles, Missouri. Marine Corps Lance Corporal David L. Espinoza of Rio Bravo, Texas. Marine Corps Lance Corporal Riley J. McCollum of Jackson, Wyoming. Marine Corps Lance Corporal Kareem M. Nikoi of Norco, California. Marine Corps Lance Corporal Dylan R. Mirola of Rancho Cucamonga, California. Marine Corps Corporal Hunter Lopez of Indio, California. Marine Corps Corporal Humberto A. Sanchez of Logansport, Indiana. Marine Corps Corporal Dagan W. Page of Omaha, Nebraska. Navy Hospital Corpsman Maxton W. Soviak of Berlin Heights, Ohio. Army Staff Sergeant Ryan C. Noss of Corrington, Tennessee. Marine Corps Sergeant Nicole L. G. of Sacramento, California. Marine Corps Sergeant Johanny Rosario Pichardo of Lawrence, Massachusetts. Marine Corps Staff Sergeant Darren T. Hoover of Salt Lake City, Utah. We would also like to acknowledge the passing of veterans Hector Elizalde, Deputy District Director and Military Veteran Liaison for Congresswoman Grace F. Napolitano, and Azusa City Councilman Uriel Macias, U.S. Navy officer and combat veteran. Let us pause for a moment of silence for our fallen heroes. Thank you.
Thank you, Staff Sergeant Cardenas. In our next iteration of the program, we're going to have a prayer by Chaplain Major Mike Morales, Chaplain, United States Army.
Let's go to prayer. Dear Lord, 20 years ago, on tomorrow, September the 11th, was seared into America's memory when 19 men attacked this nation in an unprecedented act of terror. Many were murdered that day, different colors, creeds, and nationalities. And Lord, on that awful day, we witnessed something very American. Ordinary citizens rising to the occasion. Courage in office workers trapped on the high floors of those burning skyscrapers. Bravery of Pentagon staff who made it out of the flames and the smoke. And we saw the courage in passengers aboard Flight 93. Father, on this day, we remember the innocent who lost their lives. We pay tribute to those who gave their lives so that others might live. For many of our citizens, the wounds of that morning are still fresh. The firefighters and police officers who witnessed the horrible acts of that day, Lord, and gave their lives, and those now who get choked up remembering their comrades, young children and teenagers, Lord, still long for their parents. Lord, we remember the sacrifices of those on that day. God, we also remember the sacrifices made by our nation's armed forces since that day. Every one of our service members is a volunteer. And God, after those attacks on September 11th, millions of Americans have stepped forward to put on the nation's uniform. Lord, many have given the ultimate sacrifice. Lord, many have come home with wounds that they will live with for the rest of their lives. God, we pray for all those things today. And God, out of all that suffering, we do resolve still today, 20 years later, to honor every man and woman lost. And we seek their lasting memorial in a safer and more hopeful world. I pray these things in the name of Jesus. Amen.
Thank you for your kind prayers. I really appreciate the fact that you guys coming out here bearing your afternoon in this sun, and we really appreciate the fact that you're out here to honor and commemorate all those lives lost, nearly 3,000 on that day, and the service members lost in Afghanistan. We really appreciate all of your support that you do for the military-connected community and veterans in your respective towns, areas, and the areas underneath your representation. It is our honor to be here in service with you, and we just like to say thank you for each and everything that you do as well. Now I'd like to bring up Dr. Keith Hall, Chief Diversity Officer and Vice President of Azusa Pacific University.
Well, I would like to echo the welcome that Mr. Brooks has relayed. We appreciate him and his team for coordinating this event and the partnership with our SCE team, our IMT team, as well as our Return to Campus team to do this safely. It would have been our preference to be indoors with air conditioning to be shielded from the heat. But we thank you for being understanding and supporting this event and finding your nice spot of shade wherever you can find it out here in this wind venue. So I would like to again welcome you on behalf of President Ferguson, who's currently traveling, members of administration, our faculty, staff, and students. We again thank you for coming to support this event. We would also like to extend an exceptional welcome to our esteemed civic and community leaders. Thank you for carving out time to be here and to support this effort. I'm grateful that we're taking a moment to meaningfully pause and to reflect on the experiences, the events, the people who are forever influenced and impacted by 9/11, and that includes most of us who are here today. You know, it's hard to believe that tomorrow marks the 20-year anniversary. For many of us, recollections from that day are still vivid and clear. Most of us can remember exactly where we were when we learned of the terrorist attacks, and we were bewildered by the video footage of planes being targeted directly at the Twin Towers and at the Pentagon. Most of us, we experienced a range of emotions that span from shock to anger to frustration and even grief when we considered the seismic impact of the tragedy. So I'm grateful that we as a community are taking time to pause and to remember. Some of you may know this, the word remember is referenced in the Bible over 240 times. God is always impressed on his people to look back. By looking back, we maintain an accurate understanding of context. We stay connected to the history that undergirds the present and that can potentially inform the future. We look back to remember the 3,000 neighbors that we lost, mothers, fathers, siblings, grandparents, beloved friends, and extended family immediately lost, no longer walking through the door, no longer having the opportunity to walk a child down the aisle at a wedding, no longer being able to celebrate at a graduation or commencement ceremony. So we remember the lives that are lost, and we grieve with our neighbors, and we extend prayerful consideration. We also remember those who bravely ran to the chaos to save the lives of others while sacrificially compromising their own lives. Jesus said in John chapter 15, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for the lives of others," for friends. And so we also look back to acquire inspiration. We esteem the service and the sacrifice of those who extended a reaction of care, of compassion, of service to others. And it prompts us to think, man, how can we embody that service today? How can we serve compassionately for our neighbors? How can we demonstrate that empathic regard and others' awareness that's desperately needed in today's society? Here at APU, we have 4 cornerstones that informs our operation: Christ, scholarship, community, and service. And service. And so this day we resonate, that word resonates with us as we think back on 9/11. It's our hope that every student that walks on this campus and our multiple campuses, that yes, they receive an academic degree, that yes, they cultivate meaningful relationships with peers and with faculty, that they develop a deep understanding of history, but they elevate in their personal walk as a student and as they transition into their respective professions, the word service. And so we thank you again for being here. We extend a warm welcome. Please know that you're a part of our family, and thank you so much again for supporting this important event. So thank you for joining us.
Before I bring up our next guest speaker, I see two people in the audience up there, Ray and Frank Kearney. I'd like to acknowledge your presence. The event you had on September 4th was classy and really represented the city of Azusa well. Rotary members, your charge is similar to ours in your service component, and I'd just like to say thank you for all you do, not only for the Office of Military and Veteran Services, but for the city of Azusa and its fine citizens. Thank you very much. Now I'd like to bring up Deacon Mario Guerra.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me here today. It's an honor to be here. On behalf of my boss, the Honorable Christine Wormuth, the 25th Secretary of the Army, thank you for hosting this tribute ceremony as we remember a tragic day in our country. I was appointed by President Obama in his last week in office. I was reappointed by President Trump a few weeks later, and I was recently reappointed by President Biden to continue to serve as the civilian aide to the Secretary of the Army. It's a nonpartisan, bipartisan job. Our military is nonpartisan, bipartisan. Today we remember and we celebrate all those who wore the uniform and so many that had a tragic day on September the 11th. September the 11th changed more than the skyline in New York City, Pennsylvania, and the Pentagon. The attacks changed a generation of Americans, our Army, and our world. But we know that that day's destruction and devastation did not condemn this country to a future filled with fear. No, this loss, as profound as it was, did not break the soul of this nation. Many said it actually made us stronger. That day fortified Americans with pride and patriotism and created a spirit of service in the hearts of a new generation. That day fundamentally changed our nation and our country, and again, some say for the better. We now observe Patriot Day annually on September the 11th as a national day of service and remembrance for the thousands of lives lost in the 9/11 attacks. We need to make sure that future generations, our children, our young adults know what happened on 9/11. I serve in my current position because of 9/11. I am part of the post-9/11 generation. As a refugee to this amazing country, I never felt more patriotic to want to help our beloved America. 20 years ago, the terrorists hijacked 4 flights and launched a series of attacks that did change America. At 8:46 a.m. on September the 11th, 2001, hijackers crashed American Airlines Flight 11 into the World Trade Center's North Tower in New York, followed by a second attack on the South Tower by Flight 175 at 9:03 a.m. The result of the crash killed everyone on both flights and hundreds of others working in the 2 buildings. Later, at 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77 struck the Pentagon, killing 64 people on board and another 125 on the ground, proving that the symbol of American defense was not immune from attack. Very few moments in American history are defined like this. We will never forget that moment and the realization that America had just changed. Many ask where you were during 9/11, and Mr. Brooks asked us to share a little bit of that. Some people have stories, heroic stories. Some are pretty simple. I was about to tee off on a round of golf at La Quinta in the desert when somebody ran out of the clubhouse to tell us that the World Trade Center had been attacked. We all ran inside to see on there, of course, to see the TV screen and the second place plane hitting the tower. Fear froze us all, like everyone else in America, and in the disbelief to what we were witnessing. I remember calling my wife and the sound of her nervous voice, asking me to please come home right away, but to be careful. I instinctively remember driving back from Palm Springs and alone and looking up and see if there was any planes, to see if I saw any planes. In the beginning, we remember that nobody knew where it was coming from. We didn't know there was going to be more attacks. We just didn't know. Our whole entire country was in shock. We were scared, and we didn't know what was about to happen. Our American homeland innocence was lost at that moment. The Pentagon, by the way, where my office is, was dedicated, the groundbreaking dedication, coincidentally, was dedicated on September 11th, 1941. It's the largest office building in the world. It's bigger than the Empire State Building. It has over 17 and a half miles of hallways. But because we needed steel for the war effort back in 1941, it had no steel in the building when it was built. Reinforcement of steel in the Pentagon was done and started in 2001, ring by ring, section by section. And when the plane hit the Pentagon, it was diverted in the only place in the entire building that had steel reinforcements. American Airlines Flight 77 struck the only portion of the building that had already been renovated. It was the only area with a sprinkler system. It had been reconstructed with a web of steel columns and bars to withstand bomb blasts. The steel reinforcements, bolted together to form a continuous structure through all of the Pentagon's 5 floors, kept that section of the building from collapsing for an extra 30 minutes, enough to save hundreds of people who were able to crawl out safely. It had fire doors which automatically opened and newly built exits that allowed more people to get out. The plane was diverted in the O-ring and literally saved thousands of lives. Had it been able to go straight through as they originally planned, it would have cost thousands more lives. The fire, by the way, lasted for weeks. It was very close to where my office is today. That's in the Army section of the Pentagon. By the way, the first casualty of the Pentagon from 9/11 was actually a taxi driver at the Sheraton Hotel right next door. When Flight 77 it hit the antenna on the top of the hotel, which landed on a taxi driver waiting for a pickup to pick up a client at the Sheraton. Today, that's covered up as a memorial and as a safety and as a remembrance to what happened there next door. For those who died that day, we will forever mourn their loss and celebrate their lives and our memories and their devotion and will remain always with us. And we will soldier on because we are America. National 9/11 memorials in New York, Pennsylvania, and outside the Pentagon have been built to honor the first responders and the victims and the countless number of impacted families and loved ones. The Pentagon Memorial, for example, captures a specific moment in time, 9:37 a.m. on September the 11th, when 184 souls were lost. The memorial sits on 2 acres of land right outside where the jetliner crashed into the building. There are 184 memorial benches dedicated to each of the victims, and they're organized in the timelines of their ages, from the youngest, 3-year-old Dana Falkenberg, to the oldest, 71-year-old John Jameke. On this day of remembrance, may we never forget the courage and the bravery of our heroes 20 years ago. Together, let us honor our spirit and our resiliency, our compassion and our kindness, our national unity and our patriotism. I was at the Pentagon in 2008 when President George W. Bush said, "One of the worst days in America's history saw some of the bravest acts in American history." We will always honor the heroes of 9/11, and here at this hollow place, we pledge that we will never forget their sacrifice. And before I close, I want to remember the last words spoken by Todd Beamer, an account manager for Oracle, who was headed to California for a day only aboard United Flight 93. And as they overtook the hijackers, and saved so many lives when they all came out and he said those words that we all heard, "Let's roll." And that's been our motto for so many years. So in closing, I want to remember 20 years ago today, 20 years ago today, not tomorrow, today, 246 people went to sleep in preparation for their morning flights. 2,606 people went to sleep in preparation for work in the morning. 343 firefighters went to sleep in preparation for their morning shift. 60 police officers went to sleep in preparation for morning patrol. 8 paramedics went to sleep in preparation for their morning shift. None of them saw past 10 a.m. on September the 11th, 2001. In one single moment, life may never be the same. As you live and enjoy the breaths that we take today and tonight, before we go to sleep, in preparation of our life tomorrow, we may always remember to kiss the ones we love, snuggle a little tighter, and never take a second of our lives for granted. 9/11 was the worst day we have ever seen, but it brought out the best of us, and we will never forget. Thank you for being here today, and thank you for allowing me to speak on behalf of this special tribute that we will always be part of this country. Let's roll.
Thank you, Deacon, for those deep, kind words. Now I'd like to bring up Captain Robert Landeros, Azusa Police Department.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon to my Azusa Pacific family, my community members. I'm honored to be here today to represent first responders. I'm here to represent war veterans. I'm here to represent our community. We gather here to pay tribute to those we lost in the 9/11 attacks. We pay tribute and we honor those that we've lost in the war in Afghanistan, the war in Iraq, and in various conflicts in our history. Each year on this anniversary, I think back to the day of the attacks. I was an enlisted soldier in the United States Army on 9/11. That morning, my unit went out into the field for a field training exercise. We were a peacetime army back then. We wore the old woodland uniforms. The equipment was old, the old style military equipment that was issued in that era. We left that morning as soldiers in a peacetime army. We made it out into the field, and these were the days that there were no smartphones. The flow of information was very slow. As enlisted soldiers, we got our information from our squad leaders, from our platoon sergeants, from our first sergeants, and from our commanders. So that day, my unit gets called back in from our exercise. We're in full combat gear. Our first sergeant and company commander had us in formation, and they informed us that our country was under attack. They didn't know by who. They didn't know how long it would last, but we did know we were at war. Our leaders told us that all of us at some point would be deploying somewhere in the world to defend our country. It was very surreal for me being a young soldier when I enlisted in the military. I didn't anticipate something like this would happen. I always knew that I might be going overseas to serve at some point, but watching our military switch from peacetime to wartime was very significant to me. I watched us switch from the woodland uniforms to desert camouflage. And my journey took me to various posts throughout the United States, and I ended up becoming a police officer in the patriotic days after 9/11. I joined the Azusa Police Department, and I stayed in the service in the reserve components. My journey took me to serve in the war in Iraq as a staff sergeant. I spent 12 months in country, a place called Baghdad, a place called Diwania. I served with the new greatest generation. These were the veterans that were in the service when the attacks happened. These were the men and women that joined after the attacks happened. These are the men and women that continue to serve today, that represent this new greatest generation. We've all know somebody who served. We may know somebody who's given their lives for this country. Our nation is currently dealing with some very significant challenges, politically, socially, economically. But the one thing I get motivated about is looking at this group right here, seeing the diversity, seeing us come together as Americans. And no matter what challenges we face in this country, I'm confident that we will come together as Americans. On behalf of all of our war veterans and the heroes we have lost, I encourage everybody to come together as Americans. Join with your neighbor. Spread love and good spirits with others. Set aside your differences. Place your faith in God, country, and family. These are the foundations that this country was built on. God, country, family. Never forget those that were lost, and take a moment to spread that love with your neighbor. I'm honored to be here today, and I thank everybody for coming to pay tribute to our nation's heroes. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Landeros. We appreciate your candor. Next up, I'd like to bring Acting Assistant Fire Chief Carl Flores to the stage.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Los Angeles County Fire Department, I welcome you here as tribute to 9/11. Now, 20 years goes fast, but in those 20 years, our nation has changed quite a bit. Not only in the fire service, law enforcement, and the military. Years before the 9/11, I have to say I was involved as an emergency manager for LA County, representing the entire county in preparedness for it. For my luck, it just happened on the other side of the nation. But for me, it accelerated my career tremendously. The morning of 9/11, I was actually a member of the Terrorism Early Warning Group. That name kind of sparks a tone, doesn't it? And I was ready to do a presentation to a group I didn't know, but it was a number of like 50 or 40 people, somewhere in that range. And when that happened, I didn't get there. I had to turn around, go back to the office, go back to the County Emergency Operations Center. Things have changed. So I imagine that's the kind of change everyone in the nation had. I had to look at your own future, the future of your family, the future of your community, just a little different. In the United States, the response to it killed a lot of people, approximately 3,000 people, 343 firefighters, and about 40 law enforcement. To that, I want to take a moment of pause for those deaths. They were unreasonable. That response to that building took tremendous courage. I can only claim or testify to my personal response to a fire like that, not in that magnitude, but we have plenty of high-rise buildings in Los Angeles County. And I lean back on my training. So every responder to 9/11 had that training of some sort to prepare themselves for that day. I'm positive it was good training. As you put your equipment on and ascend the floors to go to the fire floor, you have an assignment. That assignment is to go to that floor, assess the situation, save lives, and bring people down safely, including yourself. You have the choice to do it certain ways depending on tactics and the strategy that's broadcasted by the command post. But the actions taken at the command post or the decisions made at the command post are made basically on just the information known at the time. So imagine putting yourself there, making those decisions that mean the lives of those 343 firefighters and the 40 law enforcement, the military that were involved, and the civilians that died on that day. That is quite a weight on just not only the firefighter, but on the people in charge also, whether they're military, law enforcement, or firefighters for first responders. That's not even mentioning the hospitals that had to cure or treat the injured after the fact. The events of the day truly will change everyone's lives, including today forward. A firefighter or a first responder in general has a lot of duties to do, and they do realize that one day will come where the challenge is big enough where they could take the ultimate risk. That risk is going into a building or going into an environment that's unsafe and not coming back. I praise, I acknowledge, I understand their courage, but fear was also involved. They say that 9/11 should be for everyone in the nation never to forget. In order for that to happen, people need to understand why. Okay, so you can watch all the Netflix and you can watch all the documentaries standing about 9/11, but have an understanding that there's a disagreement outside your own realm that was unsettled, and they happen to be armed or have a strategy to hurt us. I'm not one to brag about doom and gloom or something's going to happen, when and where, I don't know. But in our future, we're much more prepared than we were at 9/11, I tell you right now. Los Angeles County, the city of Azusa, we're all in that one community. We've worked hard all these years, in these 20 years, to prepare when it happens again, and God help us if it does. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate your kind and timely comments. Before we have our closing speaker, I'd just like to acknowledge the United States Army Recruiting Command. Could you guys please wave at us? Thank you very much. Appreciate your support.
Let's give him another round of applause.
All right, kind of fitting to that, our closing remarks speaker, retired First Sergeant United States Army Anthony Ball, Associate Director of Military and Veteran Outreach. Please welcome Mr. Ball.
Thank you, and yeah, big shout out to my Army battle buddies up there. I am retired. I retired in 2019, and before being a part of the university system, I spent 23 years in the U.S. Army. So back in 9/11, 2001, I had already had a deployment to Kosovo back in 1999, a couple years prior, and really didn't know, but I had a couple more deployments facing me, you know, both to Iraq and Afghanistan when that day came. I was in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I was actually on paternity leave, so I was at home with my 14-month-old daughter, and her brand new sister, 6 days prior, had been born. So I was sitting at home on paternity leave, and got a call from a family member. I said, "Hey, turn on the TV." You know, as we're watching the news events happen, it was really surreal and just a huge turmoil mix of emotions. You know, that question that I think every single one of us probably had was, is this real? Is this really happening? Once the legitimacy of the events really kind of took grasp, you know, that turmoil of emotions took another spin. I was thinking of it as crying out as a father. Here I have a brand new baby at the house. Am I gonna know the child? Am I gonna be sent off? Is there gonna be years, not being able to grow up with, or is she gonna grow up with the father at all? But at the same time, that turmoil of emotions really kicked in of that anger. I wanted to be on the next plane. I wanted the revenge, to be honest. I wanted to, that Patriot inside of me was really crying out. And it seemed like hours and hours, days, but it was probably just minutes. I'm waiting for a phone call, trying to get through to my own chain of command. I had lived just outside of base, so there was the gates were locked down tighter than I'd ever seen before. That was not gonna happen. And couldn't get through. The lines were crowded. The phone lines were just constantly busy. Maybe within the hour, I got contact finally with my squad leader, who was really taking accountability, making sure they knew exactly where everybody was at, what was going on. And the two biggest words, that kind of really set that reality in of just stand by. That meant go pack your bags. It meant handle your affairs. Get it immediately settled. Don't go too far. Be prepared. And that turmoil of emotions just really started going all over again. My bags were packed. My bills were settled. The checkbooks, all the finances and everything that I could possibly set were laid out and ready to be handled. It was probably not but a year and a half later until I finally got my call. George Bush got on TV, he got on the platform on March 19th, 2003, and said he declared war. He had declared war against all of terrorism all over the world. And I think before the sun was even able to rise that very next morning, I was already wheels up. I was on a C-130 headed off, had no idea when I was gonna come back. Sounded like a very bad airborne running cadence. It was, the whole 9 yards. So I was on my way. But I can tell you that the empowerment that I felt at that moment, honestly, it was what I had signed up to do. It's why I was there. It's what we were putting the uniform on day in and day out for. It was the sacrifice to serve my country. And I knew that was best done from beyond our own borders. That was the best way to really defend the greatest nation in the world. And I loved and cherished every single one of those duties. One of the other things that drove me just to know that this was the greatest country in the world was after the events of 9/11, watching the patriotism just flow through each and every single American, all the way across the country from shore to shore. That patriotism that flowed through each and every single one of us made me proud. It made me proud to wear the uniform. It made me proud to defend the nation from beyond the borders. It really made me proud to be an American at that time, and I knew I was part of the greatest nation in the world. So just like Dr. Keith Hall had mentioned, I'm going to close out with it once again. John 15:13. Greater love hath no one than this, and that's to lay down one's life for one's friend. It's not a fact of actually losing your life. And I could tell you for most of us, it's not our first choice. But it's simply an acceptance. It's that condition of the level of love and sacrifice that we're willing to give. It's the condition of that love and sacrifice that each and every single American on that day of 9/12, the day after, the running into the towers, the first responders that we lost that morning, they didn't run into the towers saying, I want to lose my life. They ran into the towers knowing that the condition at the level of love and sacrifice that they wanted to give that morning was exactly that verse from John 15:13. But that's a feeling that we can also choose to have each and every single day. That's a feeling that we can choose to live and be an example of as Americans. So as I close out here, I want to close with the hope that we remember the unimaginable events from 20 years ago, that we remember the 2,977 that did lose their lives, but we also remember that we have the choice to share that greater love. That we have the choice to share that greater love with each and every single one of our friends and fellow Americans that stand next to us today. So thank you so much. God bless everyone. Right now, I want to go ahead and ask that everybody stand. For our service members, please render a salute during the playing of taps. If you're a veteran, I welcome you to join them. For civilians, please remove your headgear and place your hand over your heart.
Just thank you very much. Continue to honor and preserve this day, not only here, but also when you go home. I just want to say thank you once again, and let's get some shade and some cold drinks. Thank you very much.